Okay, so first of all, thank you very much to all the people that register for this webinar, and especially to the people who are today, the attendees of today here. It's so nice to have you here and can exchange ideas with you. And I feel very, I feel very not lonely. And that's important for me in this moment, right? To share with you, to see that you are there, that you can share all your ideas, and you are invited to use the chat box in order to express your ideas or to ask questions, make comments, and so on. Welcome, Gabriela, and welcome, Catherine. So let's begin. When writing academic text, our first impulse is to begin writing as soon as possible. That may lead us through a complicated course of action full of bad decisions, lack of coherence, endless cycles of writing and rewriting, frustration, and usually unsuccessful attempts to produce acceptable text. To avoid that, I want to present you a plan to act in a more thoughtful way. As usually, I begin with a quote. And to begin our journey today, is a journey through academic text. I chose this quote, which is short but full of meaning. This Austrian-British philosopher puts in few words what most writers do not realize. Writing is a cognitive task that can only be done if you attempt to do it. Perhaps you have a lot of ideas to write something and try to evaluate, organize, and express them in your mind. That's good, but it makes it better if you attempt to actually write them down. Some people just write them down without any reflection or preparation, and that may be good for certain types of text, like the ones created to entertain. Though novelists and short story writers say that they have to do a lot of planning too. However, for writing academic text, you certainly need more reflection and planning because you have to fulfill some expectations within some constraints. But the idea that writing develops when you attempt to do it is still true for both kinds of tasks. The difference is that when dealing with academic writing, the attempt to write down begins with actually writing down your ideas, evaluating the statements in terms of the target goal, intended audience, etc., and then organize them. Sorry. The theme of today's webinar doesn't emerge from a vacuum. The middle paragraph is widely known, but writing paragraphs in academic text cannot be approached only following a kind of recipe. You need to understand in what kind of context they are going to be used and what the purpose is. And even more, you have to realize what is actually behind the action of writing that kind of paragraphs. Of course, I will talk about what characterizes the model called the middle paragraph and how to do it. However, I intend that you grasp not only the steps to build it, but also why it is such a powerful device to enhance your academic writing. As I have just said, writing a paragraph in an academic text is something that you have to do taking into account the context in which it will function as a means to transmit a message. Therefore, it must reflect the characteristics of academic writing, achieve a specific goal, and functions coherently together with the rest of the text. So let's analyze what such a context is. When we talk about academic writing, we refer to a form of language that is used by people who interact in academic context through reading means. That gives academic writing two main elements: specific purposes and permanence. The purposes are tied to the need of creating arguments that can be believed, and the permanence is linked to the fact that the written form of a language remains unchanged indefinitely. Both elements, strong arguments and permanence, imply a product of human creation that responds to a particular context, one that differs from others which are more suited to the general public. The reason for having academic writing is that we need a way of communicating with people who interact in academic context, presenting arguments about disciplines, theories, and research to convince scholars of their validity requires a clear, focused, and consistent way of writing in which misunderstanding is ruled out. That is why academic writing exists. Academic texts share a set of characteristics that you should be aware of and follow the rules associated to them. They reflect the context within which you have to produce your text. They are, in fact, the criteria that let you create and evaluate your text. I have conducted previous webinars about these characteristics of academic writing, and you can look at them, look at it in DoctoralNet website. And as you can see, look at those characteristics. It's a formal context in which you have to say things explicitly. Why? Because you cannot allow misunderstanding. You have to be precise, especially to avoid that. You have to be structured because academic tests are expected to have specific structure. You have to be unbiased because you are expected to present an argument providing different points of view for your position and also against it. You have to be responsible in the sense that you have to acknowledge people and ideas that have been considered before in relation to what you are writing about. And you have to be supported. In other words, you have to reflect such responsibility using quotations and acknowledging the authors of those ideas. And you may say, but what is the main goal of academic writing? Well, its main goal is to convince people of the validity and appropriateness of your arguments. Consequently, you have to be precise when writing. Use the language in a way that makes clear what you are talking about. To do it, you need to be sure of what idea or message you want to transmit. That's the first thing that you have to be sure of having. And then choose the words and type of sentences that better illustrate it. avoiding imprecise expression that may cause misunderstanding. To do that, it's necessary to act in a planned way that accounts for the components of the writing process. But at first and perhaps third sight, academic writing seems to be something mysterious and consequently unreachable. Why? Basically because most of you have not had formal and continuous training on it. By the way, I'm using the word training not because I think it's a type of conditioning, but because it reflects that the set of skills that academic writing comprises has to be practiced, though not in absence of reflecting, thinking, and questioning. Academic writing is in fact complex, but it is also made of components that can be learned and internalized, and therefore, this is very good news, you can master it. So it is complex, but attainable. But what is involved in writing? To illustrate this point, let's use the model of Flower and Hayes about their theory of writing as a cognitive process. My intention is to help you visualize the cognitive processes and environments involved in the task of writing, because I believe that to perform high-order thinking tasks, directions to follow are not enough. You cannot just use a kind of recipe. You need to reflect. You need to understand what is behind the whole process. You need to understand at least the basic nature of those tasks so as to find ways of being creative when doing them. If you don't understand what is behind the writing process and you just use a kind of recipe, you are not going to produce new things, to create new texts. As you can see, there are three main elements involved in writing: the task environment, the writer's long-term memory, and the writing processes. Therefore, writers have ideas and experiences to communicate in written form, but they have to create texts that are governed by constraints and conventions. To do that, they have not only to be aware of those two elements, but also to perform some writing processes to assure the valid and appropriate expression of their ideas within the existing constraints and conventions. So, writing is conceived as a process of generating and editing text within a set of constraints that makes it a problem-solving task, one that usually requires to alter previous decision in order to solve the problem in a more effective way. A task that can deal with well-defined problems, ones with specific goals as well as clear solution path and expected solution, but also with ill-defined problems, those that do not have those characteristics, that have new things, different things that you have to take into account. Now, let's have a quick view of the components of writing depicted in the model. The task environment. Okay? It refers to what is outside of the writer, but influences the text. It includes the rhetorical problem and the text that is being developed. It comprises things like the given topic, the characteristic of the audience, the established rules, and other constraints, especially in academic writing. Writers tend to redefine this environment in terms that are meaningful for them, but if they do it inaccurately, then their ability to solve the problem, or in fact, to write a valid text, is diminished. Now, the writer's long-term memory is the bank from which writers take information out to create their text. It can be in their minds, but also in outside resources like books, articles, etc. And the writer processes are the actual processes that help writers plan their writing, which in fact is to create an internal representation of the knowledge they want to communicate. It's to create an image of what you want to communicate, addressing the goal and constraints, actually translating their ideas into writing, reviewing the product, and making necessary changes based on their monitoring of their actions and the results. Now you have an idea of what is involved in writing. Complex? Yes. Attainable? Absolutely. Many people do it every day. Why don't you? Now, let's go a little deeper. Let's talk about these components of the components of these elements mentioned, but we are going to approach them specifically from the academic writing point of view so you can have a better idea of what I'm talking about. By the way, welcome to all the people that has come to this webinar. Okay, the first component of the task environment is topic. In academic writing, it is usually given to the writer. For example, you have to write an essay about the effect of, let's say, product A over human beings. Sometimes, as when you are writing thesis or dissertation, topics are not given, but approved. In either case, they are in fact a constraint to writing. You have to follow some guides, some rules in order to write them. The main characteristic of topics in academic writing is that they should be clear and well defined. Okay, and that is, in my experience, that's perhaps the most difficult element for you when you are trying to write academic text, because sometimes you don't have the idea clear in your mind. And remember that in some minutes ago, I told you that that's the most important thing, to know exactly what you want to say. Okay? That implies well-defined problems to write about. You cannot leave the problems, or you cannot leave the topics in an undefined way that can produce misunderstanding, not only for your audience, but usually for you too. However, handling topics may become a muddy field for many graduate students because they fail either to focus on a topic that is clear and well-defined, or to make it meaningful for them, so as to create an accurate representation of the writing task. In other words, you have not only to be clear what you want to talk about or what you want to deal with, but also you need to make it meaningful for you. You have to consider it meaningful, valuable for you, so you can really make an accurate representation of what you are going to write about. When you have to write about something that doesn't mean anything for you, you don't know what to do, and you begin to write and write and write and make cycles of writing and rewriting, because it is not something that is meaningful for you. The next component is the target audience. Academic writing is created for formal, acknowledgeable audiences. You are not writing for your neighbor or for your child. You are writing for scholars, peers that know what you are talking about, and they can evaluate that. So that means writers must follow the characteristic of academic writing and show deep and reflective knowledge of the content if they want their text to be effective. And that's why I'm talking about all those things before talking the middle paragraph, because it's important to understand that you have to really understand, or you really interpret what is behind the whole writing process, so you can move into it in a more effective way. And the final component of the rhetorical problem is the exigency imposed on the task. Academic writing has exigencies that go from the structure the text should follow, to the kind of language that should be used, and to the degree of analysis expected. Theses and dissertations are examples of those exigencies. In summary, the writer has to address the peculiarities of the task environment. The good news is that all those components can be learned and mastered through reflection and practice. Now it's time to talk about the writer's long-term memory in academic writing. As I mentioned before, this memory does not refer only to the writer's mind, but also to the outside resources that provide knowledge to write text. In academic writing, that knowledge extends beyond the topic to the target audience and even the writing plans. The knowledge about the topic should be deep, extended, and also reflective. This last characteristic is essential to perform critical analysis that is a main requirement of academic text. The knowledge about the target audience means to be aware of its needs and degree of knowledge about the topic. What do the readers want to know? Why? How much new information do they require? The writer needs to take that into account when developing the text. Academic texts express writers' own discovery processes, but they should organize, transform, and reorganize information to meet readers' needs and expectations too. Writers also need to know about writing plans or strategies so they can address the characteristic of the audience and the task environment, and also make the writing process easier. Again, the good news is that all the components of the writer's long-term memory can be accessed and learned. The third element of academic writing is the writing processes. They are the actions a writer needs to perform in order to create a text that can be fully understood. I would say not only fully, but badly understood. Those processes are influenced, and they influence the other two components. And consequently, they are not processes conducted in a linear way, but in a multiple and interconnected one. Now, let's see how those writing processes can be approached in academic writing. Planning. It is not only the act of figuring out how to go from point A to point B. It is mainly the act of creating an internal and abstract representation of the knowledge that will be used when writing the text. According to the cognitive and learning style of the writer, that representation can be a single word that represents a whole set of ideas, or an image, or another code. Okay? But you need to create your own mental representation of what you want to say. Now, planning has three sub-processes: generating ideas, organizing them, and goal setting. Once again, those sub-processes tend to merge instead of following a compartmentalized flow of doing and finishes process. It's not that you begin generating ideas, finish it, and don't go back to it, and then you begin organize them and then go back to it. No. Generating ideas implies to retrieve information from long-term memory. Sometimes that information is so well defined in memory that the writer can translate it into writing easily, while in other occasions it is so fragmented and unconnected that translating it into writing requires more reflection and searching for information to fill up the gaps. The essence of this sub-process is the creation of ideas to communicate. It's the part of the process in which you say, I want to say something. What I want to say is this. Sometimes it comes very easily to your mind and it is clear and well defined, but sometimes you have too much information that you cannot build that representation so easily, and then you need to reflect and analyze what you want to say and use other sub-processes like the one that I'm going to talk about right now, which is organizing ideas, which, by the way, I'm going to conduct a webinar about organizing ideas for writing, academic writing. Organizing ideas is the sub-process that helps the writer give meaning to the developing text. I mean, you have a lot of ideas, but if you don't organize them, they cannot reflect what you really want to say, and your readers or your audience could be really confused. So it provides a meaningful structure to the writer's ideas by means of identifying categories, establishing main and subordinate ideas, and connecting them to reflect the mental representation of the knowledge that you have. In fact, organizing ideas attends to textual decisions about ordering and presenting the text. However, it is not a simple ordering of ideas, since it is affected by the rhetorical decisions and writing plans made to reach the audience and the goals established. So the goal-setting sub-process is an important element of writing academic text, since goals are created by the writer according to what the writer wants to communicate. That's important. You don't write in the same way to two different writing goals. These goals are in terms of what the writer wants or has to say or what needs to be linked. As they help the writer generate ideas, these ideas lead to new and more complex goals. And therefore, goal setting is not a sub-process that is done only as pre-writing activities. In fact, it is linked to the ongoing process of composing the text and has been proved to account for the difference between poor and good writers to a certain extent. In other words, you write something according to a goal that you have. But then after writing that, you may realize that you need a new goal. And then you have to write again. You have to write for that new goal. And you have to connect what you are writing for that new goal to what you have already written for the previous goal. So, as I said before, it's not a linear process. It's a kind of interconnected process. You do something and that something can change the next one or can change the previous one. That happens very, very much when you are writing your literature review, because you may write something and then realize that that is connected to something that you wrote before, and perhaps even in an opposite way, and you have to connect those ideas together and reflect that opposition. The next writing process is translating. It refers to the actual process of putting ideas into visible language. In other words, the specific action of writing. Translating implies to transfer the representation of knowledge created in planning into actual reading words. Such action requires the writer applies all the conventions associated to academic writing that have to be formal, supported, unbiased, all those things, and therefore demands knowledge and practice of building sentences and paragraphs. The third writing process is reviewing. It has two sub-processes, evaluating and revising. And like generating ideas can occur at any moment of the writing process. It is a conscious process. This is a metacognitive process that can lead to new cycles of planning and translating. It functions as a quality controller that establishes if the written text satisfies the expectation. So you write, but then you read, you evaluate, and perhaps you revise and create a new text, and then do it again and again and again. And monitoring functions as a writing strategy that tells the writer when to move from one process to another. It's an executive routine that informs the writer if the text goes as planned, if plans needs to be changed and the text rewritten, if a writing strategy is being applied successfully or not. So monitoring is that you constantly review what you are saying and you are reading and say, oh, this is not clear enough. Let me do it again. Oh, wow, I did it perfect. I nailed it. And you continue. So at this stage of the presentation, I can tell you once again that all these writing processes can be learned and mastered. Therefore, academic writing is a cognitive process that resembles problem solving and that can be mastered providing you get the necessary knowledge, something your university and we at DoctoralNet give you, and you reflect and practice it. Something that depends on you, okay? So, is at this moment of the presentation that we can talk about the middle paragraph. Why? Well, because now you have a basic idea of what writing academic text implies. You have the background that lets you understand the whole process of writing and can interpret the middle paragraph as a tool to fulfill the task of writing academic text. Now, you are not going to use it as a food recipe without reflection. You are going to use it as a strategy to translate your ideas in a coherent, valid, and understandable product. Writing without thinking and reflection is nothing more than cooking a recipe without putting your feelings in the task. And you know that when you do that, your food is horrible. Well, the middle paragraph is a very effective way to write down good paragraphs. A meal reminds us of food, and this device will feed your academic writing. There are, of course, more than one way of building a paragraph. However, the middle paragraph has a simple and effective structure that is easy to remember and is widely used in academic writing. As you can see in the slide, each letter of the acronym refers to a part of the paragraph. Let's expand on each one of them. The first element to talk about is the initial sentence that you need to write down and which should stay the focus of the paragraph. The topic sentence that expresses the main idea explains what the paragraph is about. And all sentences in the paragraph should, I would say must, have a direct connection to it, because a main idea on its own does not constitute a paragraph. It must be supported by relevant details, examples, and analysis, as we will see. The most common mistake we can find in academic writing in relation to the main idea is that a paragraph discusses more than one main idea. Now, remember, each paragraph must have only one focus or topic. You have to begin a new paragraph whenever you want to express a new main idea or focus. The second element to include in a paragraph is the evidence that supports what the main idea says. Remember that in academic writing, all your claims must be supported so the arguments can be considered valid and convincing. The most common mistake in relation to this element is to provide evidence that does not support the claim because it refers to another topic. You may think that is not common. No, it is very, very common, especially in thesis and dissertation. So it's not only the matter of providing citations, data, etc. The evidence must be related to the main idea and prove it. So you provide evidence and then analyze it. Leaving the evidence to speak by itself is a very risky action, since you cannot be completely sure of how readers may interpret it. Therefore, you have to explain how evidence proves the main idea. And that cannot be done just restating or summarizing the evidence. No, you have to point out what the relationship is between the main idea and the evidence provide, and also explain it. That's the way of avoiding a common mistake when writing paragraph. Finally, you need to build a link to the rest of the paper. It can be approached as a conclusion about the main idea, or as a connection between the paragraph and the argument of the section of the chapter or the thesis. It may also be a connection to the next paragraph. And that's beautiful, when you can connect one paragraph to the next one, and we as readers can follow your flow of thoughts. This element helps create a text that is coherent, since its ideas are connected and flow smoothly. Many people forget to include this link. So, as you can see, the middle paragraph has clearly stated parts that should function together to provide clear and valid arguments in your academic text. And now I imagine that you are saying, okay, that sounds great, but I want to see one of those middle paragraphs so I can fit my mind. Well, let's see an example of the middle paragraph. Read it, please, and check the different parts of the paragraph. So you have there identified the main idea, then in-text citation as evidence, then the analysis, and finally the link to the main argument of the paper. Read it, think about it, and if you want to ask any question right now about that, just write it down at the chat box. If you prefer to do it later on when I finish, it's okay. Thank you, Annalie. Okay, let's continue then. Okay, I want to summarize what you need to remember about the middle paragraph. So you have in one place what you need to remember. First thing, only one main idea per paragraph. Only one. Second, main idea is expressed in one sentence that is called the topic sentence. Third, the paragraph expands the main idea. That's why all the content of the paragraph should refer to just that idea. Fourth, evidence provides the necessary support to convince people that the claim you make in the main idea is valid. So the whole paragraph is built in order to provide enough support to convince people. Fifth, evidence could be information for journals and books, data from your own research, quotation or paraphrase from literature, a chain of logical reasoning you have developed. It could be an image, or it could be a related anecdote of experience. Six, analysis is the part where you explain how evidence proves what you said it proved. And this is interesting. Analysis is the part where you explain how evidence proves what you say it proves. Number three again, oh yes, the paragraph expands the main idea, Virginia. So when you say that, analysis is the part where you explain how evidence proves what you say it proves, is because it's not just a matter of talking about relationship. You have to do it to establish that there is a valid relationship between the main idea and the evidence, that the evidence really, really supports what the main idea says. So analysis assures audience interpret information as you intend. Number 8 is not a restatement of the evidence. No, it's not that you say the evidence, you provide the evidence and then you say it again in a different, using different words. No, that's not analysis. Analysis is critical analysis of the relationship between the evidence and the main idea. I think it's nice. Link connects, links connections, right, really, takes the discussion back to the main idea of the paragraph or connected to what the paper is trying to prove. And links functions as a bridge to next paragraph, assuring the coherence and consistency of the paper. That's the kind of things that you need to remember about middle paragraph. And now I'm going to summarize the most common mistakes when writing paragraph in academic text that you should avoid and that you can avoid it using middle paragraph in a recent way. So the first common mistake is more than one main idea per paragraph. This is very, very common. So you begin with one idea, which is the topic sentence, but then in the middle of the evidence or in the middle of the analysis, you decided to talk about something quite different that requires a new paragraph. The second common mistake is not related evidence. So you make a claim, which is your main idea, and then you use evidence that is not related to that idea. That's very, very used in chapter 4 of dissertations when you are discussing your results. And then you make a claim and provide data or the results of your analysis as support for the main idea. And when we as professors or committee members check that data, we realize that that data is related to something quite different, okay? The third most common mistake is evidence that is not useful to support the main idea due to lack of analysis. If you don't analyze the relationship between data or evidence and the claim and the main idea, your your work is useless. And the fourth one is paragraph without a concluding sentence. This is very common. So you move to the next paragraph without concluding, making a conclusion about what you already said in this paragraph, or at least without connecting it to the next paragraph, what you are going to discuss in the next paragraph. And finally, I want to give you a rubric to evaluate your middle paragraph. Evaluating your performance is a very useful tool to improve it. So write down the paragraph and use this rubric to check how much your academic writing is improving. So you write down your paragraph and you check your main idea. And then you check the evidence. And then you check the analysis part. And then you check the link using this rubric or any other one that you can find. But this one is very useful. And you will have, really will have, an instrument to improve your academic writing. Okay? And this is my opinion. In my opinion, this is the main idea of this webinar. Of course, I'd really like to know your own main idea. And here you have suggestions made by DoctoralNet. This about getting our app right now so you can be in touch very easily with what is going on in all those things, okay? And by the way, the last image on the right is one of my most beloved, loved webinars, which is a series about argumentation. I love that part that I did this year, I think. I don't remember when. And this is the last, another important information. So you can sign on to PD Education according to university site and get all the things, latest events, most recent videos, endorsements, and all the kind of things. So my dear attendees, I'm here. I would like to know your comments, your questions, anything that you want to exchange with us. I haven't said welcome to Erica. Nice to see you again. Marriott, I don't know. So, Virginia says, or Virginia, as we say it in Spanish, just to confirm, the meal plan is applied on each paragraph throughout your paper. Oh, yeah. First of all, let me explain one thing. I presented the meal plan, which is formed by two parts. One is the understanding of the academic writing process, and the other one is the use of the meal paragraph. Okay? I want to differentiate these two things because I believe that the meal plan is something more, is something greater, or is something more complete than just the meal paragraph, because the meal paragraph is a device, but the meal plan implies all the preparation that we talk about, planning, organizing, reviewing, monitoring, all that kind of things. Now, regarding the middle paragraph, if it can be used in each paragraph throughout the paper, it is decidable, okay? But if you don't want to use it in each paragraph, at least you have to plan each paragraph. You can use other types of organizations of your ideas in a paragraph, and you will find many other approaches to that. But the more you use the middle paragraph, the easier it will be for you. And then when you are successful enough writing middle paragraph, you will begin to make changes to that. But in that case, your changes will be more accurate, more well-intended, and better, though. Okay? Okay. Okay. Thank you, said Maria. Erica, of course, said that she got a little late, but no problem. Gabriela said, thank you for this webinar. What is the name of the app? According to the, we have here you have it. The app is the PD Education app that you can go to App Store or Google Play. Bureau says, great, thank you for the valuable information. I'm glad you like it. Marriott says, I always forget to make the link with new paragraph, mainly because in my head, there is the link to everything. Yes, and that's a very, very common attitude, because when we are writing, we tend to keep information for us because we believe that we have said it, or because we believe that it's obvious. But the thing is that when you are writing academic text, you cannot assure or take for granted that everybody is going to understand the text in the way that you intend them to do it, okay? That's why academic writing is very formal and is very, things has to be said explicitly and precisely. Okay, Sharonda says, this is quite beneficial. Thank you, my pleasure. Vilma says, thank you. Can you give us some clues to connect idea between paragraphs? Sure. In fact, I have conducted webinars about that. But let me give you some quick things. For instance, it is very, very useful if you use at the last sentence of one paragraph, expressions that connect to the other one in terms of let's suppose that you discuss something and then you say, now it will be time to discuss this point because they are intimately related. That's one way. But another one is that begin the next paragraph saying something like, in the same order of ideas, or in similar context, and you continue doing that, or therefore, or consequently, or on the other hand, when the next paragraph is quite different, is opposite to what you are discussing, then you begin the topic sentence of that paragraph saying, on the other hand, and you say that. I think that it could be very useful. I'm going to check that if you are interested, and I can do it again, a new version of how to write sentences, paragraph, and sections of specifically of dissertation or any academic text. So let me know if you are interested in doing that, and I will prepare that, well, for next year. but at the beginning of next year. Okay, Vilma says, thank you. Can you, oh yeah, that's what it says. Drive says, this is such a valuable information. Thank you very much. My pleasure, dear. Wisdom, thank you, Dr. Patino. Can you discuss how applying the middle paragraph or any formula interacts with our own creativity? I just wonder to what extent you should sacrifice your own creativity or style to satisfy its convention. Well, my dear, you don't have, I don't think that you have to sacrifice your creativity when you follow conventions. Why? Because I assume that you are talking about creativity in terms of ideas and not in terms of rules. I mean, I think that you are talking about creativity to produce new ideas, new ways of looking at things or that kind of things, and not about new ideas or ways of writing down them. And why I say this? Because when you are in a specific context, you have to assure that your behavior in that context can be fully understood and your message is fully understood too. Let's suppose this. Let me give you an example. Suppose that you are in a business meeting, okay? You have great ideas about how to create or promote a new product. And then you go to this business meeting with all the important people of your company, and you decided that you are not only going to be creative in relation to your ideas, but also creative in relation to the way you express your ideas. And then you begin to say, hey, folks, how are you today? You know what? I nailed it. I have an incredible idea, and you will freak out. Think about that. Okay, you have a great idea, and your idea could be great, in fact. But if you decide to be creative in the sense of changing the whole conventions to express your great idea, you will be in danger of not being fully understood. Now, let's change the context and let's go to a pub. Okay, you are going to spend some time with your peers, your friends in that pub, and you have a great idea of how you as a group can do something incredible enough to enjoy life awfully, let's say. But then you decide to be not only creative in the idea that you are going to propose them, but also in the way you decide to express that idea. And you begin saying something like, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great and fully appreciated opportunity for me to let you know a great idea that perhaps, as Shakespeare say, you cannot go in that way because they are your peers. They have their own conventions. So, well, I know that in your next message you say, I think your literature just answered that. So that's the thing. Creativity is not only allowed, but expected in terms of the ideas. But in terms of the means to express those ideas, I can advise you not to be too creative, okay? Because it is the way in which the academic context, in which the academic group functions. Virginia, thank you. It's a place to start as I become more comfortable writing. Yes, and you can practice. The more you practice, the more you apply the rubric, the better and more comfortable you will feel. Hannah said, Erica said, if you search DoctoralNet up, it comes up. Thank you, Erica, for the help. Hannah says, is this webinar recorded? Yes, it is recorded. I'm late and would love to watch the recording. No problem. Since you are registered to this webinar, you are going to get the link to the recording. So, okay, according to you will be very interested in a webinar about writing sentences, paragraph, and sections. I can do that. I think that for February, which is the one that I have not prepared yet, and sections. Good, dears. I take this into account. Winston, those examples are fantastic. You like that? Thank you. I do not wish to be misunderstood in my, no, in my academic writing, so I will take this to her. Yes, don't be misunderstood. You mean, it's something like you can make a revolution within the system without the system knowing that you are making that revolution. And how the system doesn't know that? Because you perform following the rules of the system, but the ideas are the point that will make the change. John saying, serious thanks. I appreciate the practical perspective and encouragement. Good. I mean, all things related to academic writing can be learned, okay, and can be practiced. So you can rely on us, of course, on your university too, and you can rely on us to show the intricacies of academic writers, so you can reflect upon them and practice, because we always give you first an interpretation or an understanding of what is the concept behind what you are dealing with. Then we dissect the components, like I did today when I say this is the task environment, this is the learner's memory, and so on. And then we always finishing giving you ideas in order to put it into practice, and in order to develop the skills, and in order to evaluate your learning. Can you also talk about editing our own writing next time? Yes, because that's part of the writing process that we talk about, right? Let me go there. So let me show you. Here we have, what it is, planning is something, then translated is actually writing, and then the last two processes are related to editing, okay? But I can prepare something about editing specifically. Yeah. Okay. In fact, we are going to talk about organizing your ideas for for academic writing. Is I can't remember exactly if the next one, the one in November or the one in December. I think it's the one in November. And in that specific webinar, we are going to discuss how you can put together your ideas, but first of all, how you decide what should be used and what not should be used, how to organize those ideas, what you should do pre-writing, during writing, and after writing. And in the after writing, we are going to talk about editing, okay? So Hannah, be sure that you register in that webinar, organizing your ideas in academic writing. Any other question? I'm going to stop the recording. Yes, of course. Wait a minute. Thank you, everybody, for registering for this webinar, and I hope you register for my next webinars.